The Versus Ambivalence franchise has welcomed 2 new groups, and this is quite the big news because I was not expecting the franchise to actually expand and bring another group or even 2 groups to its lineup, but it makes a bit of sense taking into account how audition shows in South Korea, for example, work, in which the members that don't make it to the final group end up debuting in some way. So this ends up being almost true to life in what is happening right now in the Versus Ambivalence franchise. So let's talk about the new 2 groups in the franchise and what they can offer in this episode, of course, of SEIYUU Lounge. Welcome to SEIYUU Lounge, I'm your host Vanessa, and today we are going to talk about Versus Ambivalence's 2 new groups, Fun4re and Illuvista, or Illuvista, if you want to be less fancy in the pronunciation. So yeah, we have 2 new groups joining the Versus Ambivalence franchise. This is quite exciting because people, or at least some fans, really wanted the full 14 members in the original lineup to actually debut together, but they didn't end up debuting together. And we have Cranv right now. As you may already have noticed, I'm a big fan of Cranv. Cranv have been impressing everyone since 2023. They have been quite impressive so far, so I don't have any complaints whatsoever about their music. They really are good. And the lineup that they got, especially the characters, because the voices in Cranv and the voices that you will find in Fun4re and Illuvista are exactly the same voices, but the characters that were chosen for Cranv really seem perfect for Cranv. The style and even the quirks they have, it matches so perfectly that I can't believe it was fan voted, that lineup. It's crazy. So yeah. Let's talk a bit about what is Versus Ambivalence, for in the case that some of you are listening to this episode and don't know what is Versus Ambivalence, and then we are going to talk a bit about Fun4re and Illuvista. What is Versus Ambivalence? So I'm going to keep Versus Ambivalence's explanation to the bare minimum, otherwise we will take a while for that to happen and for me to brief you in on this project. A big suggestion I have for you is for you to visit the website and search for Versus Ambivalence. You will find a big feature about the project in which I have recently updated with the new groups and with relevant information. But to keep things really simple, Versus Ambivalence is a 2D music project by Nizista. Out of the 14 original members, 7 have debuted as Cranv, and the remaining 7 are going to debut as Fun4re and Illuvista, so they are going to be split into 2 groups basically. This franchise is the very first time that we got something akin to an idol survival show or an idol audition show like the ones that they do in South Korea. This is really similar in vibe because fans actually voted for the members that would make it to the final lineup of Cranv, and the ones that didn't make it to Cranv were actually not included in the group. And this is quite awesome because this emulates life in some way. Because if you watch those Korean or South Korean idol project programs, you will understand easily that those that don't make it to the top 10, the bottom 10 that are within those 20 that go to the final, those 10 that don't make it to the final group, they end up debuting as either one group, a sort of a constellation, or they end up debuting as 2 completely different groups. And then you have 3 groups emerging from the same project. The main one actually supported with a lot of budget and will belong to that label that was actually promoting the show. But then you will have 2 groups that will actually work together outside of that, for example. So in this case, you actually have that. You have Cranv, that is basically the main group in this franchise. They have been releasing amazing music so far. Climb, their first EP, was amazing. Rise, their second EP, was even better. And now we are going to have Fun4re and Illuvista, 2 new groups in this franchise that promise to bring really exciting things to the table. So let's talk about the new groups, because we have 2 new groups in here and I've been saying their names, but right now you do not know what or who am I talking about. In one side we have Fun4re, a group that has a kind of a jolly vibe going on in there. Their name is actually stylized to have a 4 before the R in Fun4re, and this is going to be tricky for some people to actually try to read it for the first time, but it's actually read as Fun4re. At the same time, this group features vocals by Tayo, voiced by Ryo Tsuchida, Mio, voiced by Kengo Kawanishi, Futaba, voiced by Ayumu Murase, and Kazu, voiced by Tasuku Hatanaka. Of course, with this lineup, and especially knowing the characters that are behind this project, or behind this group in specific, you know that they are going to have a jollier vibe to them. At least that's the vibe that I get from their colors. They use a really vivid orange, and from their whole clothing and everything in between. So they seem to be the group that is going to have the jolliest vibe out of them all. But let's notice something in here. We have the orange in Fun4re, and we have the violet, let's say, in Illuvista. Those are actually the two colors that Cranv has used so far. The orange in Climb and that purple or violet in Raise. So they are using in some way the colors that Cranv has used before. I don't know if this means anything, but this is a good thing to point out. But still, we were talking about Fun4re, and this lineup seems to me that is going to be a bit jolly, preppier, and their sound may be a bit more poppier than I may enjoy. But I will have to reserve my opinions to when the music drops and check it out and see if they actually sound really good. But seeing the lineup and seeing the characters, I'm betting this is going to be a group that those that love idol pop groups, they are going to enjoy them a whole lot. On the other hand, we have Illuvista, and this group is led by Rei, voiced by Makoto Furukawa. It brings Shion, voiced by Chiaki Kobayashi, and Cook, voiced by Shintaro Asanuma. Now, this group sounds a bit more regal in vibe, at least being that the group is actually led by Rei, who is basically a character all about his appearance. He's a bit shallow in that aspect, but he's all about his appearance, and he knows he's good, he looks good, and he wants to look the best. So we are going to get, I believe, a kind of charismatic, show-offy style of music with this group. I may be wrong, but I'm making assumptions based on their looks and their vibe. And they may have a kind of confident sound to them, perhaps a bit more focused on sounding elegant or regal, one of the two. And that has to match Rei because he's the leader of this group. So let's see how they fare, but so far, looking at them and knowing who is a part of each group, I'm more inclined to enjoy Illuvista because Makoto Furukawa, Chiaki Kobayashi are here. Shintaro Asanuma, I'm not that big of a fan as a singer in comparison with the other two, but is really versatile. So you have a really interesting lineup in here, much more condensed than in Fun4re, because they are 4 in Fun4re and they are 3 in Illuvista, so they may bring really interesting things in here. In Fun4re, it will be interesting to see a different dynamic from the one that I'm used to with Cranv, in which Tasuku Hatanaka leads the way and has a massive booming voice that really inspires and influences how their performances actually hit the listener. In this case, his character is actually really shy, so I'm quite curious to see what he can actually bring in this context with Fun4re. In some way, fans actually have heard all these characters sing before, because when Cranv was not around and Versus Ambivalence was still trying to choose who would make it to the final lineup of Cranv, we actually had a couple of songs performed by them, and in which we got members of Fun4re right now and Illuvista actually shining a whole lot. So now that we have them not singing at the same time as the other characters that the same SEIYUU voice, we are now going to get something a bit more focused on making them shine, and they will be a bit easier to notice in the performances, which is something that for me it was messing me up when I started to listen to Versus Ambivalence's music, was that I couldn't tell which character was which when my favorite SEIYUU were performing or when a specific SEIYUU was performing. Because at their core I could listen to that SEIYUU's voice, but I didn't know who was the character they were voicing in that specific part. So right now I'm going to have, with Fun4re and Illuvista, an opportunity to understand a bit more and get more familiar with the voices of each character, And right now I don't have the members of Crave in here, clashing a bit with Fun4re and Illuvista. So I'm quite excited about these as a whole. And once again, I will say Illuvista has the best vibe for me right now. I do like when groups have a bit of an elegant vibe to them. I'm not a big fan of idol groups in which everyone looks and has a vibe that they are a child. That's not really my thing. That's not really my thing at all. So I do like more Illuvista from their vibe. They sound a bit more mature in comparison, which is something that I appreciate. So time will tell if their music is actually more mature. Perhaps both sing preppy pop music and I will be struggling a lot to review their music, but we do not know so far. But at least right now it is the last week of June. I do not know how their music is going to sound or how their CDs are going to be titled. At the moment I do not know any of that. But yeah, that's all I have to talk about Fun4re and Illuvista. So now let's talk about their debut and what is coming. So both groups, it was decided that they will make a solo debut in the exact same way and in the exact same day. This is going to be quite interesting. Both are going to release a debut CD on August 7th. And that CD, of course, like every single CD by Crave or even the Versus Ambivalence franchise, is going to be available almost exclusively at Nisista store. In this case, I believe this CD is going to be exclusive, really, to the Nisista store, meaning that everyone outside of Japan, if you do not use a proxy service in some way, you are not going to get this CD, at least physically. But this franchise is quite friendly when it comes to streaming services, so they are for sure going to make these singles available on streaming services, whichever you use. They are going to release their debut CDs in August. They debut in the same day. The CD has the same format, which is to say they have 2 drama tracks, one previous to the debut song and one afterwards. So this may be the before creating the song and then the after creating the song. I don't know, I'm assuming things yet again. But we have a structure like this of 3 tracks, 2 drama tracks and 1 debut song. There may be more drama tracks, we don't know, but I believe this is going to be the final track list for both CDs. It's interesting that they are going to release them on the same day. This is quite symbolic in the franchise because they were part of the same group. They are going to debut in the same day. This is quite sweet in some way, and I believe fans will appreciate this a whole lot instead of having a group debuting first and making a big impression and then the other debuting second and then, for example, they don't make a big impression. So by making both debut in the same day, people will want to check both on the same day because they hold these characters dear and they have no expectations whatsoever because they don't know how their music is going to sound like. So I feel this is something that is really sweet, and yet again, it feels like it is thought for a real idol group or a real idol series to make the brother groups debuting on the same day. This is really cool. So I find this quite endearing and really awesome from the point of view of a fan to see the groups featuring the characters that were all together throughout 2 years actually making a debut together on the same day despite being on different groups. So this is quite awesome. Now, a big question that you may be asking yourself is, will this addition of these 2 groups actually change things around in the Versus Ambivalence franchise? I feel that if the quality is maintained from what Crave is doing and if Fun4re in some way and Illuvista actually step up to create music that is not what other 2D groups create and is more something in line with what you will find in real idol groups, I believe we are sorted out with 3 really cool groups that will appeal to different people. I believe in some way that the recent change that Crave made towards sounding more mature was because one of these 2 groups is going to sound a bit like Crave did in Climb. I'm quite curious to see which will be. I'm betting on Illuvista. Somehow they have that vibe for me. So it will seem like Crave will be the group that sounds really mature. Fun4re might be the group that will sound really preppy, really upbeat, really youthful, and Illuvista will be in the middle as a regal type of group, trying to be mature but still with a bit of that energy and excitement of youth. I'm quite curious to see how these will work and the dynamics between all characters, because they have already some dynamics in the YouTube channel, the official YouTube channel for the Versus Ambivalence franchise. You can already check the drama tracks or the drama parts that have been released so far, and you will see that all members are still interacting with each other, regardless if they are part of Crumb or if they are basically practicing to debut as part of Fun4re or Illuvista. But up until now, fans were actually listening to those tracks and they didn't know that those two groups were going to debut, which is really awesome. So it ends up being a way for you to check that the franchise is actually focusing since the start on having 3 groups and using the same voices for everyone else. They are saving a lot of money, but at the same time, they are ensuring that they have a consistency and a cohesion in terms of sound and quality that no other project can assure. Because when you bring a lot of different people to a project, you will have varying degrees of quality and technique. And in this case, you already know that the quality and the technique that every single SEIYUU in this project has. They will only be tweaking a little bit the way they perform and the tone of voice to match the characters that they are voicing either in Crumb or in Fun4re or in Illuvista. I find these quite interesting, and for me it doesn't change much in the franchise. I'm usually against franchises bringing new groups after 1 or 2 years of existence because it seems lazy. Since no one is actually paying attention to this project, let's bring something new to the project. What is something new? Bring a new group. There's other ways to bring attention to a project, either create a different CD series, making a collaboration with a different project that would be innovative in some way, or really create, for example, a solo CD series. That's a good way to bring in more attention and to make fans even more fans of the franchise and the characters that they love. In this case, this doesn't sound lazy to me because the characters already existed in this universe. They were there since the start. They actually performed since the start. So this is only a matter of finding them a place to be and to exist in the franchise, besides being the ones that are still in the dorm trying or training to become idols. In this case, they are actually going to get their debut, and people were still supporting them even after they didn't make it to the final group, or in this case, to Crumb. So I find these to actually not disrupt too much the franchise itself. I only am curious about the dynamics that they may bring and how the CD releases will actually work in this franchise from this point on. Because it's been a while since Crumb released music, and now we are going to get Fun4re and Illuvista, but we still have no news about new music by Crumb, which sounds a bit different than usual because last year they were releasing the digital singles and then an EP, and this year they started with digital singles and released an EP. So it sounds to me that right now they are trying to ensure that Fun4re and Illuvista are up to speed, and then we are going to get new music by Crumb. But I don't really know what to expect about this dynamic, and I will have to wait until the end of the year to understand how is going to be the dynamic in the Versus Ambivalence franchise. But color me impressed because I was not expecting these types of lineups and vibes for each group. And I was definitely not expecting the members that were outside of Crumb to actually making a debut as 2 different groups. I actually expected only one new group to come, and they will be the junior group that would be learning from them and growing alongside them. A bit like, once again, the K-pop industry does with the veteran groups and the new groups. So I was expecting some of that, but not 2 groups to actually debut and be looking up to Crumb as their senior. So that's quite awesome. I believe I've already talked plenty about Fun4re and Illuvista in this episode, so I'm going to keep these really short. I want to know, of course, if you are excited about the addition of Fun4re and Illuvista to the lineup of Versus Ambivalence, if you were actually rooting for the ones that didn't actually make it to Crumb and right now are going to get their debut as part of a different idol group. And of course, out of both idol groups, which one has your favorite singers or your favorite SEIYUU in there? Let me know in the comments below on YouTube or on Spotify. And if you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss the hand that feeds HQ's weekly male SEIYUU and music related content, hit the subscribe button. And if you are listening to this episode on a podcast listening platform, please consider following the podcast and leaving a review. Leaving a review is really simple and helps other people find this podcast and fall in love with male SEIYUU artists and 2D groups. I'll return next week with another episode of SEIYUU Lounge. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys around.